Hi, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to our next session in the Exchange Symposium on our final day. And welcome if this is the first one that you've managed to make so far. So this session is titled Education Incubator Panel, How Can Students and Communities Learn Together? And the structure that we're going to have today is two projects will be presenting, and we'll leave plenty of time for discussion across the panel and any questions from the audience. So as you're watching, if anything occurs to you, do please put a note in the chat, and I'll be picking those up and presenting them to the panel. So the Education Incubator, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is a learning space within the University of Exeter that supports innovation in teaching. So there is a budget available, that there's a selection process where academics can come into the Education Incubator and be part of a cohort that is able to experiment with and design and try out new modes of teaching, new modes of pedagogy, new modes of working with students and often with communities, so that when the teaching happens, it's really got a very rooted connection to sort of quote unquote real world, so that the education is relevant to lived experience outside the classroom. So the two wonderful projects that we're going to see today are fantastic examples of how communities and academics come together and working with students to devise programs for different audiences. So I will introduce the full panel to start. So we have Professor Fabrizio Nevola, who's the Chair in Art History and Visual Culture at the University of Exeter, who's been working with Dr. Judith Morgane at St Nicholas Priory. And then we also have Dr. Francesco Goglia, who's the Senior Lecturer in Italian at the University of Exeter, and he's been working with Dr. Sarah Lawson and Thomas Porter at Rokeby School, which is in Newham in London. So what I'll do now is hand over to Fabrizio and Judith, and they will introduce their project to you.
Hello, and thanks for coming. The way that we're going to do this is essentially that Judith and I are going to alternate for a few minutes each. I think we've got 20 minutes, so we'll be within that. We'll be within that time. I'm just going to share my screen, and what we're going to be talking about, obviously, is this project that we've been doing together over the last 2.5 months, couple of months, which brings together work that I've done in my other research work, which is sort of public facing to some degree, and with St Nicholas's Priory. So I'm going to give a little bit of context of that background before we move to the specific project we're talking about today. So basically what we're doing is we're using a piece of essentially a piece of software, an app that I started developing back in 2013. It's basically software that creates walking tour apps, which use GPS to help us do public history, where essentially using a sort of character-led walk, we guide people around a historic city, essentially hearing a guide speaking to them from the past in some sense. And the navigation occurs using a historic map. And from the beginning, this project included collaboration with local heritage organizations, in the specific instance at the beginning with Florence. Now, I think that this sort of stuff is presented in some ways rather better through images, through video. So I'm just going to share with you some extracts from a video we made from the original 2014 launch of Hidden Florence and the 2019 update, which I'll talk very briefly about shortly.
Welcome to Florence. I'm Giovanni Di Marco. It's the year of our Lord 1490. Some will tell you it's an age of gold, that we're living in a new Rome. And maybe they're right. Look at the palaces, the incredible paintings that fill our churches, the wool and the precious silk cloth that we make, the processions and festivals that fill our streets. But I'm not a banker or a great patron. I'm a wool worker, as most of us are in Florence. I work down near the Palazzo dei Signori and I live out in the parish of San Ambrogio. I want to show you the city of Appopolano, show you the places I know, the churches, taverns, street corners, markets. I'll tell you stories about a city they like to say is a paradise, inhabited by devils.
So I could carry on with that, but it's all available on the Hidden Florence website. Now, that project basically ran from, it was an experiment. It was quite a small piece of work done in about 6 months back in 2013-14. More recently, in 2018-19, we expanded this with a group of academics, with a team of academics, including people from the University of Toronto and Cambridge. We expanded the range of characters and experimented also with more professional acting voices than that slightly ham South London voice you just heard. That was relaunched in 2019. What we've also done is do some other sorts of experiments using 3D location-based 3D modeling, which is a separate project, Hidden Florence 3D. And more recently still, and this is where the Hidden Exeter work comes in, I have been leading a project funded by the European Union, a HERA Humanities and a European Research Area project, which brings together 5 universities here: Exeter, Erlangen, Nuremberg, Valencia, Groningen, Trento, and Valencia again there. And what we've done with this project is essentially we've expanded the original plan. We've been still using geolocated maps, and we've been working very extensively with, let's call it material culture, with objects in museum collections, which we're geolocating. So we're essentially working with the sites of the city of Exeter and objects from museum collections. And this exists within a website context, as you can see here, with this navigable map, which you can move between past and present, but also with a series of 5 city apps for those five cities, and all of them involve partnerships with museums, city museums in our local areas. So the opportunity that really came up in earlier this year was to team up with St. Nicholas's Priory, and I'm going to hand over to Judith now.
Yes, it's just such a wonderfully exciting project to be part of. I am the program and partnership.
So, do you want me to play?
Hold on a second, Fabrizio. I'll just do a quick intro. Sorry. For those of you who don't know, we're Exeter's oldest building and have only recently reopened to the public. So, very important for us to partner with people, and we're always on the lookout for exciting projects. So we had the chance to speak with Fabrizio and see if we could get on board with what you've just seen. And just to give you a bit of an idea of what we usually do at the Priory, Fabrizio is quickly going to show a video to give you a bit of background.
Now I can hear you. Okay, I'm going to put the video up. I'm sorry, Judith, I completely lost it.
Not at all. Thank you. You can play it.
The joy of tech. Okay, and we'll play this one.
You might have to screen share again.
Sam, sorry. My God. So you've been hearing the music, I'm not doing the video. Judith, you're back.
Yeah, as you can see, we've got a very diverse program that we put on, and particularly cool to now be able to join with the Hidden Cities project. St Nicholas Priory is all about opening heritage to the public and doing public history, and bringing that closer to the public. So as you see, very family friendly, lots of different things from performances to concerts. The one thing we haven't actually been able to do is a walking tour, because we're just the one site. So it was fabulous to then hear about Fabrizio's project. We got in touch with him and did an initial talk about what is happening with his development of the app. And yeah, so that's how we got to work together on this. And then for us as a fairly small venue, and even though we're an old building, we're very new as a community venue, that's super exciting. And now that we managed to show you the film, you probably have a good idea of how well that kind of historic walk fits into what we generally do. And I think Fabrizio is now going to tell you some more of how we managed to actually make this work. Your sound is off, Fabrizio.
Yeah, I'm just doing every single trope of, you know, messing up a Zoom call. I keep not being able to see you, which means I don't have eye contact with whoever's talking, and then, you know, anyway. Just to connect up then, so Judith had very kindly invited us to do that talk. That was myself and Kate Osborne, who's been a researcher on the Hidden Exeter project, on the Hidden Exeter side of the project, of the Hidden Cities project. And then soon after that, I saw the call go up for the Education Incubator, which seemed very, you know, good fit to what we were doing. And I'm just going to share a screen again, hopefully a little more effectively than earlier. So the Education Incubator has various different strands, and the one that we're talking about today is this community engaged project. And so the basic makeup of the project that we're doing basically brings together the research team from my HERA-funded project. So David Rosenthal, who's assisting with the editing and production of the apps and sort of getting the scripts, assisting Judith and the students with the scripts, and Kate Osborne, who, as I said, mentioned earlier, she's historian specialised in the period we're looking at. On the other side, obviously, there's Judith, our heritage, the lead for our heritage partner, St Nicholas's Priory, and we've also, through the funding, worked with 5 student interns who have directly contributed to writing the content for the app, which will be recorded in due course. I would say we're sort of 2/3 way through. We're well on course to completion. Last week, in fact, we did started, and this is a rough edit of the beginning of what will be a promotional film and a short documentary that explains what we've been doing.
Hidden Exeter is one of 5 city apps that we've created through a European research-funded project called Hidden Cities.
Good day to you, traveller. Welcome to Exeter in this, the year 1588, the 30th year of Queen Elizabeth's reign. My name is Thomas Greenwood, at your service.
Earlier this year, through some additional funding from Erasmus+, we started a new piece of work with students from the University of Exeter who worked with heritage institutions in our local community here in Exeter, working with colleagues at the Royal Albert Memorial Museum and at St Nicholas's Priory. We've created a new walk within the Hidden Exeter app.
Ah, I see you've already got yourself a copy of Mr. John Hooker's splendid new map. Only the best cities have these.
Sorry.
I think one of the most interesting things the students found about this story is that the Priory represented community in 1536 in our story, and it's very much the same nowadays. We are trying to bring people back into the Priory, but also back into all our heritage sites. So you have a heritage community that is trying to reach out also to the academic community, and equally the academics are trying to come and talk to us. So you have the students who are really the medium through which we are trying to get the research from university down into the city, and the experts from the city to talk to the students from the university. And I think this is where we find research being made meaningful for us here at the Priory and all the heritage sites in Exeter.
RAM has some amazing objects in its collection, and many of those relate to the archaeology of Exeter. We've got many on display, but we're always looking for innovative ways of making those objects accessible to people. So that's why it was particularly keen to work with the Hidden Exeter project. This is enabling people to get out into Exeter and actually experience some of those objects where they were found, and of course where they were used all those centuries ago.
So, that was slightly rough cut. I mean, we've still got some extra audio to get in there, but that gives you a bit of an impression. And it was quite nice to see something that we literally filmed last week. And I think it captures also something of the challenges of doing this sort of work in, continuing COVID-y times, masks and so forth, which delayed also some of the start times for all this. Just a few words just back to Judith, and we'll have done.
And I think Exeter has never looked better. Just thought of it, how exciting this place actually is when you look up and into buildings. And I think that's exactly what is happening here. I mean, for me personally, at the Priory and working with the students, it's just exciting to see how young people who at the moment and over the last few months clearly didn't necessarily have the chance to walk around Exeter and do the research in place. A lot of them were working remotely and had to do the research via email and talking to our various specialists here at the Priory and in the city. And still, they have managed to pull together so much interesting detail that I can go out and say, oh, I never actually realized this. I've lived here for years and I've never seen it. So it's literally that sort of thing that makes our city come to life, our heritage, and that's what connects all of us. And that's the sort of thing, that's the kind of project I believe that we're all after. And I think Fabrizio in particular is a specialist in making these projects happen. So I can only say I'm very grateful that we can be part of this.
Well, it's been great fun to do. So yeah, I guess the only other thing I would add to all this is that we've obviously been talking specifically about the Hidden Exeter work here, but one of the really nice things that's come out of all the sort of the software that sits in the background is that it's becoming increasingly easy to think about projects such as these, because essentially we know how it all works now, and it's very easy essentially to build the content much more freely with much less, if you like, of a controlling hand from the technologists that are supporting us, Calvium, who are experts in making this sort of software. Okay, good. Thank you very much. I hope we kept to time.
It's lovely. Thank you very much, Fabrizio and Judith. And there's nothing for spiking wanderlust and a need to become a tourist again and travel, like seeing how wonderful it is to explore a city that you don't know. And I very much look forward to the day when we're allowed to do such things again. So we are leaving Exeter virtually, and our next project is going to explore connections between the university and working with a school in London. So I'd like to hand over to Francesco first to introduce, well, I'll leave it to him to pick up from here. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, can you see the presentation full screen?
Yes, it's full screen now. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So yes, we are moving to London, to East London, and the title of our project is Students as Teachers of Multilingualism, a bi-directional project between the University of Exeter and a secondary school, Rokeby School in Newham, East London. And I'm working on this project together with Thomas Porter and Sarah Lawson, who will speak in a couple of minutes. The presentation is split in 3 parts. In the first part, I will tell you something about how the project came about and what it is about. In the second part, Sarah will tell us something about Rokeby School and the context of Newham in terms of multilingualism. And in the third part, Thomas will tell us something about the activities that have been going on because of this project in the school. So this is a pilot project which is testing, will be testing, a kind of innovative way of collaboration between students at the University of Exeter, in particular modern languages and cultures, where I am based, and students of the already mentioned secondary school, Rokeby School in Newham, in East London, which is an area, as we will see in a bit, Sarah will explain, it's an area which is highly multi-ethnic and multilingual, multicultural, so it really offers it's an ideal locus to study multilingualism and multiculturalism. There are 2 cohorts, so some students from Exeter Modern Languages and some students at Rokeby School, and I will explain a bit how they have been engaging and they will be engaged. First of all, some background information. I teach 2 modules, or I teach actually 1 module, Multilingualism in Society, and the other one is a brand new module that will start next term, next academic year. The first one is a second year module. It's an SML module, so it means that it's open to all students of modern languages. And it's a module in which students learn about societal multilingualism, minority languages, both those minority languages that are historic minority languages, such as Cornish, Welsh, or Catalan in Spain. But they also learn about community languages, or those languages that in the continent are still labeled as immigrant languages. And they also learn about language revitalization. The brand new module, Migration and Multilingualism, will focus on multilingualism and the link with migration and immigration. So students of this, the project started in January, although we started with our activities in around February, and it lasts until October 2021. The first module that has been involved in this project was multilingualism in society. So my students who often study issues of multilingualism in society, but they rarely touch and see the real thing. It's really different from studying in a book or from hearing things from lecture and then having the experience of collaborating with, for example, a multilingual school in East London. The project also starts from a very established collaboration with Rokeby School that we've been collaborating, Sarah and Thomas, for nearly 3 or even 4 years now. My research deals with immigration and multilingualism, and I have been collecting data from my research in the school. In 2018, 5 colleagues, together with myself, visited Rokeby School, and I think it was in September 2018, and at the time of the European Day of Languages, we provided taster sessions on culture and languages that we teach at Exeter. Later in November 2018, but also in 2021, February, Sarah Lawson visited Exeter. The first time she visited Exeter, the second time it was on Zoom, and she presented on multilingualism and ethno-linguistic vitality in the school to my students of multilingualism. The collaboration went on with several other activities. For example, in May 2019, 40 students from Rokeby came for one day down to Exeter, and we engaged them in activities and also showed them the campus and life at the university. 4 Rokeby students even won an Exeter competition on best essay on multilingualism. So this is an ongoing collaboration, and the project starts from this ongoing collaboration. Now to Sarah.
Thank you, Francesco. One of the most striking aspects of Rokeby School, even within the London Borough of Newham, which is one of the most diverse postcodes in the country, is its diversity and also its inclusive ethos. I'm just going to give you a little snapshot of how that manifests itself. There are approximately 27 different ethnic groups within the Rokeby community, the largest being Bangladeshi. There's also a big English-speaking community, and then there are communities which are classified as white Eastern European or other Black African. We have to, in these contexts, use the Home Office ethnic descriptors, which are in themselves quite vague. And for example, other Black African students in Rokeby speak of a range of about 19 different languages. So it's not a homogeneous group. Could you show the next slide, please? So you can see here with the pretty colors, it's a bit clearer how many different ethnic groups there are. And I should also point out that this was prepared in September of 2020. If we prepared it today, the percentages would be slightly different, as there's constantly changing a population within the school and the borough. We've already this academic year welcomed an additional 114, that's 114 new students into the school, which is the equivalent of almost 4 whole classes. We're able to do this because post-Brexit, there's a lot of population movement within London, and some people are also leaving. So we do get a lot of new arrivals. The other thing that I should say is that the link between language and ethnicity with the mobility, and for example, with research like Francesco's, the link between language and ethnicity is not fixed. So, for example, some students of Bangladeshi origin would put down their first language as Portuguese or Italian or English. So if you could pass on to the next slide, we can see here that about 76% of the school population in Rokeby speak English as an additional language. We say additional language rather than second language because it could be their second or third or fourth or fifth language. So, and to put that in context nationally, that statistic would be at about 16%, that's 1/6. In total, the students in Rokeby speak approximately 58 different languages. And if we include the staff who also mirror the diversity of the students, that figure would go up. You can show the next slide, please. So these are the big languages that are spoken within the school. You can see Bengali and English are about par, and then a whole range of other languages, Urdu, Romanian, Italian, and so on. If you go to the next slide, you can see that these are languages where there are fewer than 6 speakers in the school. Sometimes there's just one, maybe it'd be 2 brothers. It's a boys' school, so that's why I say brothers. And these students get very excited if a new speaker of their language comes to the school that they can help to support and welcome. Oh, I never thought I could be able to speak my language in school, etc. So next slide, please. So as Francesco said, the idea of us doing this project is to give the students in Exeter also an idea of how multilingualism plays out in real life. And so the Rokeby students shared their language experiences with the Exeter students. So one of the key things is that if you're multilingual, you use your languages with different people or for different purposes. So in school, You might be using a different language with the teachers than you would with your friends. And with some friends, you might use one language, and with other friends, say ones with who have a similar linguistic experience, you might use another language again. So you'll be swapping. So you've been to Italy, but you're Bengali. Some friends you speak Bengali to, some you speak Italian to, the teacher you'll speak English to, etc. And again, at home, intergenerationally, parents, grandparents, and siblings, you may well use different languages. And in that context also, you would see a significant amount of code switching. So jumping from one language to another, or starting a sentence in one language, et finir dans une autre, for example. And then again, for many of our students, they also use yet another language and maybe even another script when they go to their place of worship. Next slide, please. So this also creates quite a few challenges, not just for the school, but also for the students themselves. Constantly having to welcome new students into the school and get them up and running, that's a job in itself. There are people, that's their job in the school to do that. And a lot of the students also help with that by buddying up with the new students and supporting them. We also have to make sure that the parents can fully engage in the school life, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. Many of the parents, it's difficult enough for a parent who grew up in Britain 20 or 30 years later to find out how the school works. But if you come from a completely different culture and a different language, it's an even bigger job. Students also have to learn standard English rather than the sort of slangy language that they may pick up off their peers. You can't write, there were bare people at the party in your GCSE English exam, not if you want full marks. Many of the students suffer from culture shock, coming to the busy East End of London, so many people, so many different experiences. That's a challenge. Then everybody's expected to take their GCSEs at the end of year 11, whether they arrived in year 7 or in year 10. And some of them do arrive in year 10, and some of them do very well in that. And for the school, identifying this primary needs of the student. Does this student need support with their language development, as in English, or have we also got special needs to identify? And how do I identify that when I don't speak their language? Next slide, please. So to support, we make sure that we communicate multilingually with all our parents and carers. We have interpreters at our parents' meetings and any meeting with parents. We try and make sure that all our letters and emails, if necessary, are in 2 languages. And we also have a list of the languages that all our staff speak, so that in an emergency, a distressed parent comes to reception, we can find someone who will be able to support them. We have extra English classes for beginner students, and we have meetings for parents, ethno-linguistic parents meetings. So the meetings go all on in the languages of the parents. So they can come, they'll understand the meeting, it's explained, whatever the school is doing is explained to them clearly, and they can ask their questions confidently and also share information and support from parent to parent. And that the feedback from that has been very positive. We also make sure that we value the heritage languages that the students come with, so that if it's a GCSE in that language, we get them to take the exam as soon as possible, so that their ability is recognized. They're not just feeling, I can't speak English, but actually I've got an A star or a 9 in Italian or Bengali. And so that builds their self-esteem. And we have a range of aspirational activities, next slide please, that we do with the students, such as careers workshops where we focus on languages, but also the collaboration with Exeter, where they can see that universities do value languages, and they can see how jealous the Exeter students are of the fluency that they already have with their languages. And we kicked off this year's series of activities with me yet again, but on Zoom, talking about the ethno-linguistic vitality in our multilingual community. Thank you. Over to Thomas now.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Yes, so I've got the sort of on-the-ground task of sharing a little bit with you the output that our students have come up with as a result of working with the University of Exeter. So as I hope you've appreciated, we're quite a sort of special school, very diverse, obviously, with lots of different cultures and communities present. You can see this was a competition that we ran over lockdown as well. and it was about celebrating the linguistic diversity in Newham. And we got, I've put two of the examples on the slide, but we got lots and lots of entries. And I think one of the main things that we found that working with Exeter is that our students get to sort of celebrate their cultures, and they get to feel important, they get to feel special, which is something that they don't often feel. And as Sarah just said, when they're new in the country, making them feel good about where they're from and where they are now is a really important thing. So you can see a couple of examples on the right hand side, looking at where students have come from, and the sort of top example, again, picking up those different languages that are spoken in different places. So at home, in school, with different people. So again, celebrating that idea. And the University of Exeter have been very generous with their sort of prizes for these competitions, which in a strange way, I think has been really important for the students, because what we try to do quite a lot at Rokeby is we try to add value to these skills that they already have, and quite often in school they sort of underappreciate these skills. So I think the fact that they are getting a prize for taking part in this is a really big deal for the students. Next slide, please, Francesco. A slightly more recent one, again on the left from Exeter, was a competition about their favorite word, which I thought again was really nice for the students, and it sort of builds that love of language as well. For them, which I think is really important, because we find, I am a sort of French and Spanish teacher, and we do find that the students who come from other countries, once they sort of have cracked it a little bit, they can also be very good at picking up these additional languages, so that they're able to talk about their favorite words in their home language or in a new language. I did a little video on bibliothèque, because it's my favorite French word, but that was a nice little competition again. And a sort of new project that's coming through is working with our Lusophone community in school, with Dr. Susana Alfonso at Exeter. And that again is looking at the sort of migratory patterns, or how these students have ended up in Newham. And I think, again, what all of these things are doing is creating a sort of sense of community for these students. And especially with the Lusophone community, because they come from such diverse areas. I think to try and find a little bit of community in Newham is particularly difficult for them. So I think this is a really exciting project as well for us. Next slide, please, Francesco. So I'll talk about our incubator project now, where we've been working closely with a group of student interns from the University of Exeter. So these are fourth-year students, and it's the idea of them, student interns, working as teachers. So we've been working quite closely with them to help them to formulate different ideas, which they can then deliver to the students in Rokeby. And it's been a really interesting process for us. We've talked, as a school, we discussed what we would like from the students at Exeter, and we've met with them to discuss. And then we've been sort of passing ideas back and forth. So we've taken the creativity of the students at Exeter, and we've applied a little bit of hard-nosed teacher advice. And I think the projects that we have come up with have been really excellent. And actually, Francesco, maybe go on 2 slides and I can show you some examples of the projects. So we have a project with our Russian students. Sorry, I should have mentioned we also teach Russian here at Rokeby. And she has been looking at language through cinema. So it's taken a Russian film, and she's actually produced a sort of interactive website for students to work through, with a series of podcasts on there as well. So really gone sort of above and beyond to engage the students. And top left is about a recipe book. Again, we thought this would be a nice idea where students could bring in their different cultures and their sort of different family traditions. And because we talked about the connection between food and eating, and also what sort of what importance that has to you and your family, what kind of traditions. So that was an idea again to bring in these different elements of culture that we maybe don't get to talk about normally on a day-to-day basis. So to celebrate again those things. And we're really looking forward to next week for some of the student interns to virtually come into our classrooms to talk about their experiences of studying languages at university. Again, we are trying to sort of raise the aspirations of our students and to help them appreciate the skills that they already possess. So the students will be talking about their year abroad, which is a really obviously exciting year in any language learner's university career, and then talking about as well what the student interns are planning to do in the future, so career aspects, and as well as just talking about university life, which is another thing that we are really keen to promote with our students as well. So lots of really exciting things going on, and I think we are very lucky as a school, sorry, school bell right on cue. We are very lucky to be working with the University of Exeter to help our students to sort of open their eyes to different opportunities and to help them to appreciate just how unique and just how talented, I suppose, that some of them are. So a big thank you to you, Francesco, for involving us, and I'm looking forward to the relationship just continuing and growing.
Thank you both, Sarah and Thomas, and the pleasure has been mine to collaborate with you. I just would like to stress one thing, that our student interns have been producing activities and they've been in dialogue with Rokeby teachers, Thomas, Sarah, myself, but they have been also learning on how to produce activities that are decolonized. So all the activities have been conceived to be on different cultures, and languages are not only one culture. We have activities on Portuguese and recipes that involve all potential cultures that are linked to Portuguese, so Mozambique, Angola. This is a key important thing that Rokeby always stressed at the beginning of our project, but also Exeter is involved in decolonizing the curriculum. And my module as well, focusing on minority languages and community languages, somehow works on this new approach to languages. They are made aware that languages are all important. Of course, some languages are linked to your career. Some languages are more important because of culture and maybe family culture or local culture. But I think this is the message that we want to make clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to the panel. Francesco, Sarah and Thomas, that was fantastic. And it is a subject close to my heart. When I was 18, I did an exchange year and spent a year in a country that was of a different language that I had to learn. And it is incredibly frustrating when you can't express yourself, and it is, or when you can't be understood, or when you're treated like you're stupid because you can't express yourself in the language. And culture shock really snuck up on me. And so I can relate, and it is a fantastic work that you're doing with the school. So we now have our remaining 10 minutes, some time for some questions. And Sarah, you've raised a couple of questions back to Fabrizio and Judith about any reaction or feedback from the public about the app and how it's going down, and the languages that the app's available in, or perhaps it will be available in.
Okay, is that okay? I'll answer. And Judith, if you want to say anything else. So the question of user testing, Hidden Exeter, the first walk, was essentially launched right in the middle of the sort of November lockdown, and was developed largely during a period where there was very little opportunity to do user testing. We did a lot of user testing on the Florence original, and it's a good question, because actually in this project we had in fact included a user testing moment. We're not yet fully, the scripts aren't fully complete, so the plan is to do one of these. I'm not entirely sure at what specific moment, so I won't tell you exactly there. But yeah, user testing has been a part of this, but it's been less of a part of it because we've been doing a lot of this stuff just online. And that does raise some challenges. The question of language, the Hidden Cities platform, so the sort of system that we're using, is designed to be multilingual, so it can support multiple languages. And the first walk is in English and German, slightly randomly, but we asked the tourist board which might be the most useful second language to include, and we use German. I think it was based on the number of visitors to Exeter. But in some places it's much more of a political thing. So for example, for Trento and for Valencia, though English is the language for all the apps that we've done, in Trento there's a language issue in the Sud Tirol in Italy, so German and Italian were included. And in Valencia, it's actually, we even got into trouble there. It's Catalan and Spanish, but it's actually Valencia and Spanish. But so there's an even micro localism that was raised as an issue, and we ended up having to have quite a discussion around the two-letter language symbol that we use to indicate the language. Valencian isn't recognized with a international two-letter code, so there was quite a lot of discussion with the University of Valencia about that to avoid sort of fallout. So yeah, multi-language is absolutely possible. The walks that we're currently doing, what language wasn't a consideration. We're just doing it in English, and that's primarily for financial reasons. Each of these, there's a certain amount of work in doing translation and professional type recording. I was really struck by how different our two presentations were. I was very, I mean, obviously it's about students working in a small group about with a heritage organization, but also about sort of public history and making a sort of finished piece of work that is public facing and sort of aimed at a particular type of audience. And obviously the much broader scope of Francesco's project I was really struck by. So yeah, really interesting to see two very different takes on this for me.
Thank you. Cheers, Sarah. So we also have a question from Lindsay. So thank you so much. So lovely to hear about these two projects and hear the perspectives and benefits from the university and community partners. I'd like to ask the speakers about what opportunities they might see for embedding this engaged approach to learning into the university curricula. Francesco, would you like to start?
Yes, that's a fantastic point here, because after this pilot study that actually is going on, it will end in October, and we have another chance to involve maybe not student interns, but my students in the new module, analyzing, for example, issues of multilingualism. I think I would like to find a way for this to be sustainable, for this to be embedded in my modules, not just this year in these two modules, because I think the fun is starting now. Now we know a lot, we have learned a lot ourselves. And so, yes, ideally, I would like to find a way to incorporate these activities, both of students in Exeter producing and being in touch with a secondary school, with Rokeby. And also, I think Rokeby would be very happy to have this going on, not just as a one-off, but as a pilot study, it's really working very well. We need to find a way to make it embedded. Yes, I agree. Sarah and Thomas, if you want to add anything.
I can only echo what you said, Francesco. I think for us, for it to be an ongoing, regular event would be excellent. And I think, as Sarah says as well, we've got new students who join us all the time. So repeating something year on year still has value for us. And I think you're right, the value is growing as we develop the relationship that we have.
Yeah, I think I would agree with both, that it's getting stronger and stronger the more we work together. So I think it would be excellent to keep it going.
Fabrizio?
Yeah, I'm happy. briefly to comment to this. So in a way, yes, Francesco, it was interesting that Francesco sort of focused on the modules and the overlap between teaching, and I suppose I focus more on the community part of the education incubator. I didn't really speak to the education bit, but we've already in fact incorporated some of this sort of place-based learning approach into our teaching. So this, in a sense, as a trial run for how we would do the project we've just been talking about, I used the software that sits behind all this with a cohort of field trip students who would have gone on a trip to Italy and who this year didn't. And so we ran this with a cohort of 48 students. It was much more than I really wanted, but we made 6 essentially walking tours of Florence based on students' research, essentially all done remotely. It was incredibly successful. It's the best student feedback I've ever received. We got 95% student satisfaction and requests that we do more of this sort of stuff in our teaching. It's really nice for students not to be writing essays all the time. And I think to see something that you can actually then see on the device that you spend so much of your time on and show your parents or share the link with anyone you want was really brilliant. So yes, we're incorporating that into next year's teaching. I've talked with the head of history about them including it in their curriculum reform for sort of public history, embedding public history in their teaching. I've mentioned it a bit with the head of modern languages as something that could be of interest also because of the multilingual element to it. People in a sense, they like the tech because it's something that's very simple, but that they do. We all use Apple Maps. We all use maps, and the idea that you could write stuff and then find it and share it to tell a story. It doesn't always have to be about historical research. It can be any form of community-based, place-based interpretation. So I think there's a lot of scope for using this more widely outside of the humanities and cultural geography or things like this as well. So yeah, a lot of scope for it.
Thank you. We have time for one more question, which is going to be mine, because I have to power the microphone. And I'm really interested, both projects show there is enormous complexity in your projects, whether it's across sort of international collaborations with universities or within the community, and so many different languages happening at once. And so there's a sort of geographical complexity. And then there's a generational complexity where you are also coming together across ages. And as someone who doesn't like to operate much more than a toaster, I think there's a sort of that generational and tech combo can be a really interesting thing. So for you, what do you feel has been sort of part of the secret sauce of kind of bringing these partnerships together? And particularly, I think, with Francesco, Sarah and Thomas, that continued relationship because it's established and really building and growing. I realize Judith and Fabrizio, this is a newer partnership. So is there anything that you feel is like secret sauce for you that really is an important part of what makes it work?
If I may, it's because we've been working already together, we can communicate effectively. For example, there were a lot of challenges this year. COVID was still around, and while at one point, I don't know when Rokeby opens in March. So we have a different academic year because our students end in the end of March and the Rokeby goes on. So a lot of mismatches that I think we managed very successfully because of communication and between us and understanding the other situation. And that's why I want to reiterate that all this effort would be wasted if we couldn't go on maybe next year. But I guess this is my feeling. I think we managed to, as a team, many challenges.
That's a very active choice, making it work, finding a way of communication that works. It's
and just to give you an idea, if I may, we initially, the project was planned taking into account COVID. So it was planned without trips to the school, without any live events. Okay, fine. But we couldn't plan other things. So for example, we initially planned an event in the school only for students of Rokeby. That was not possible because of another lockdown, extended lockdown. So we converted this into, with permission of the incubator, into the competition you just saw of the vignettes, which turned out to be very successful. And so for students at Rokeby produced something and felt engaged, and my students analyzed the vignettes in class. So we changed in progress as well. We had to.
Would anybody else like to add any reflections?
Yeah, I think for us, the most important thing was to, well, for the first time with this kind of project, work with the students. And I think it's interesting to see how obviously students have very different ways of, well, as you say, different age groups have very different ways of communicating. And so for the students to come, well, to the city, as it were, even though only electronically and virtually, and talk to our experts, I think for us, the important thing is to give them time, to give the different groups of people who communicate in different ways, time to find the right way. Do we want to email? Do we want to call? Can we make a meeting in person happen once restrictions eased? Are we texting each other? So I think that's something, I know that it possibly sounds very a strange observation, but I think for a group of students who are very set in there, saying this is what university means, this is how we study, there's an essay at the end to be assessed on something, to now have a project where actually what they do is talk to real experts out there who are doing the job every day, and go for a drink with them and say, oh, that's how it works. And it's like, oh, we'll walk past that building and look up there, that's what you see. That kind of well, real life interaction, I suppose. I think it takes time to make that work as a group. We had quite a few, I think about 15 people involved, and all of this being virtual was a challenge, but I think also very enriching for all of us to realize, well, it's ways of communicating, and it's ways of finding the right language to get the information that we want. Because I think a lot of students possibly don't necessarily know how to formulate their question to get the info they need, because they haven't needed to do it. Because what they do is to go to a book, they go to their professor who knows exactly what to say, it's like, read this, click on that, that sort of thing. But to say, well, I need to know about this particular part of the building, how do I formulate that? How do I get the answer out of someone? I think that's an experience for students that, in my opinion, contributes a lot to their experience. And I certainly hope that my group of people here in the city have made that possible for them to learn about that sort of research and approach to making a project happen. What do you think, Fabrizio?
Oh, only just to say that and then I know you want to get to we've hit the time, but that I think one of the unusual things about this particular internship has been that it was ended up primarily focusing on PhD or postgraduate level students. So in a sense, they came with sort of high-level research expectations. When I've done this work with undergraduates, in a sense, they found it much easier as a medium, because that short form, technology mediated was perhaps a bit easier to get into than for the long form PhD students who get worried about the footnotes and the sources and so forth. So I think it's quite interesting to see how these sorts of things play out very differently, perhaps even to your own expectations. You'd think, oh well, they're all young, they're all going to be great on tech, and actually some of them are sort of say, well, I've still got a dumb phone or whatever. And as they all say, smartphones for dumb people. Okay, right, fine.
I'd like to put my dumb phone in front of the camera at this moment.
Dumb phones for smart people.
I'm afraid we are up against time. So I would just like to thank everyone on the panel for the time that they've put into preparing for today and coming together and sharing your work and research with us. It's been fascinating. And for audience, do please come join us back at 2:15, and we'll be having our final session of the day. So otherwise, enjoy your afternoon.